In June 2026, 4 Chinese warships surrounded a single Philippine Navy frigate near a reef. Both sides told each other to leave.
This is Philippine Navy Warship 7. Your actions are illegal and will be reported.
And nobody fired at each other. But this is now happening almost regularly. And to understand why, you need to hear how the Chinese explain their actions and not just how it gets covered in the Western headlines. So here's the core of it. China claims most of the South China Sea based on what it calls the 9-dash line, a boundary that it traces back to maps from the 1940s, before most of today's Southeast Asian nations existed as independent states. So Beijing's argument, Chinese fishermen, traders, and administrations have documented activity in these waters for centuries, and that historical presence is the basis of Beijing's claim, not something that Beijing invented. In 2016, an international tribunal ruled against China in a case brought by the Philippines, saying that the 9-dash line has no legal basis under the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. China's response, then and now, it never agreed to let the tribunal decide the matter in the first place, and even points to the fact that the US, the United States, which is the loudest voice demanding China follow the convention, has never really ratified it. From Beijing's point of view, that's being asked to follow a rule book that the world's most powerful navy has not signed on to itself. So now let's talk about the Scarborough Shoal. China calls it the Hongyang Island, excuse my pronunciation. It's basically a small area of rocks and reef in the sea that both countries, the Philippines and the Chinese, claim as their own. In May this year, the Philippines noticed China had built a small structure there, and they complained about it, and China said it was just for scientific research and took it down after the Philippines objected. But a few weeks later, ships from both countries ended up facing off exactly right there. Warships from each side got too close to each other and it got tense, though no one actually fired anything. Here's the part that China points to when explaining why it reacted the way it did. It says it didn't happen out of nowhere. It happened right as the Philippines was finishing up a military training exercise that lasted almost 3 months, together with the US, Japan, New Zealand, and Australia. And the Philippines already has plans for over 500 more joint military activities with the US in 2026 alone. So from China's point of view, it's not the one sailing its ship halfway around the world into someone else's waters. It's responding to a lot of countries showing up in its own backyard. China's biggest argument is that it feels surrounded. Japan sent its own combat soldiers for a joint military exercise aimed towards Taiwan. And that's when what is a military exercise? Just to explain, that's when 2 or more countries' militaries train together, practicing things like moving troops, ships, and equipments as if it were a real conflict, even though it isn't one. This was the first time Japan had done this since the World War II. Australia, meanwhile, keeps signing new defense deals, and then the US, Japan, and the Philippines have started holding regular 3-way meetings specifically about pushing back on what they call the Chinese pressure tactics. Now, China is looking at all of this, and it sees a group of outside countries, most of them nowhere near the waters at all, teaming up against it right next to its own coastline. And its argument is, if you build up a military presence right at someone's front door, you can't really act shocked when the country pushes back. China hasn't only been picking fights here. An example is the Reed Bank. It is an underwater area in the South China Sea. It's not an island, it's kind of submerged. It's a big shelf under the water. It sits pretty close to the Philippines, and both the Philippines and China claim it as theirs. What makes it a big deal is that people believe that a large amount of oil and natural gas has been trapped underneath. Nobody's fully drilled it yet because of the ownership dispute. A few times, though, Beijing had offered a different idea. It said, instead of fighting, why not just share it? Both countries can drill it, and both countries could get a cut. nobody has to win the argument, and the Philippines actually took that offer seriously in early 2026 after the country ran in a bad energy shortage and needed new options. On top of that, China's ambassador had publicly said if both countries stop letting this one dispute define the whole relationship, there's a lot more they can gain together, and that's kind of like a friendly gesture. More trade, more investment, more tourism, unlike what you see in the US media. So they just wanted to set the sea argument aside and focus on the future instead. My arguments don't mean that the Philippines and the Vietnam and the other countries don't have a real case. And I think you should hear that too. The Philippines, Vietnam, and other countries who claim the same region say that China's map line, the 9-dash line, the one it uses to claim most of the area, just doesn't match how international law actually defines which waters belong to which country. And they point out that back in 2016, an international court already ruled on this, saying China's claims don't hold legally. As I explained earlier, China doesn't accept that ruling, but it's still the only official legal decision anyone has ever made on this matter. Other countries also bring up specific incidents, for instance, China's Coast Guard, sort of like a police force for the sea, right? So they have blocked Filipino fishing boats from going where they would normally fish. So both governments basically describe themselves as being the first one to be provoked. And that's actually the most honest way to understand the whole situation. So let me know which argument you find more convincing, and I'll see you in the next one.